All right. Hey, so Andy, can you share what motivated you to run as a Green Party candidate and what drew you to third party politics?
Yeah, so I think for as long as I can remember, I've really understood the two parties are not really working for most folks. And I think most people recognize that. And so for me, when I looked around about 10 years ago, I saw the Green Party represented my values, peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. And they didn't take any money from big corporations or PACs, and that attracted me to it. And that made me decide that this was the party for me.
Was there a certain election that really swayed you? Was it the 2016 Jill Stein campaign or what was it?
So I mean, I think I have been voting outside of the two-party system whenever I could since like 2000
Okay.
or so. But in 2016 and 2015, the Baltimore uprising occurred. Freddie Gray got murdered by police, and a bunch of people were really upset. People in the city of Baltimore had the solutions to the problems, but when we looked around, we saw a Democratic primary for or for mayor happening at the time,
hmm
and none of the people who were running were willing to listen to the people who were in the communities who had the
hmm
solution. That's what drove me in 2016. I got there before Bernie dropped out of the race, based on local politics.
So you're a Baltimore native. How long have you been there?
Well, people from Baltimore will say you're only a native if you went to elementary school here, but I went to college at Towson, which is right outside of Baltimore, and then I've lived in the city for 20 years. I moved here in 2005, and I've been here ever since then.
Okay. Thank you. Many voters and media outlets focus on Democrats and Republicans. How does being a third party candidate kind of shape the way that you're campaigning?
Well, I mean, it means that we have to try much harder to get coverage. It means we have to try much harder to convince voters to take us seriously.
Mhm.
Uh, Local media will be happy to cover anybody who's running for the Democrat or Republican primary, even if they have no chance of winning the election and being in the general. So it really means that we have to, just be a little bit more persistent. We can't wait for them to come to us. We have to reach out and be proactive with media and be proactive with voters.
What are some of those ways that you're planning on doing that?
One thing we do is if we see a social media post about a story that they wrote about somebody who's just entered the race and they don't mention us, we'll reach out to that reporter right away and make sure that they know we're in the race as well. The other thing is we're going all over the state and we're talking to as many voters as we can. We're not just focusing on the big cities. We're going to the Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, Eastern Shore, all of that, and talking to as many people as we can. And I think there's a persistence to it that does get us some coverage, not as much as I would like, but certainly, being there, being persistent, and making sure they know we're there really helps to make sure that when we do get a chance, we get that coverage.
So, how's that Green Party base in Maryland? Maryland, obviously a known Democrat state. How does that kind of play in with Green Party politics?
Yeah, so I mean, Maryland is a place where the Green Party has been on the ballot in every year since the 2000 election. So we're one of the sort of established third parties here, along with the Libertarians, who've also been on the ballot for every election since 2000. But our primaries are not open to anybody but people in the top two, or the Republican and the Democratic Party. So we end up with relatively low voter registration that wanes around the primary times and things like that. So 2016, we had a big drop right before the primary, so people could vote for Bernie, and then we had a big surge after the primary once people had switched to Democrat and voted for Bernie. So it fluctuates a little bit, but one of the things that happens with third parties is we always get more votes than the number of registered voters that we have.
Mhm.
So if we have 5,000 registered voters in Maryland, we might get 50,000, 100,000 votes in a
Sure.
in a gubernatorial race, which is way different than it works for the two parties.
Sure. Do you feel like third party candidates are often underestimated or, treated unfairly? And how do you like navigate that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I think people think they're not serious. I think people think that they don't understand what it is that real politics are about. And I think that the answer to that is to be honest, to be authentic, and to talk to people about why we're doing this. As much as I'd love to be the next governor of Maryland, I can look at the data and understand that no third-party candidate since the Civil War has gotten more than 3% or 3.2% for governor.
Mhm.
So
Is
we're
that
not
Maryland
trying.
alone or is that national?
No, here in Maryland.
Okay, okay.
Here in Maryland. So 3.2% for governor is the highest any third party candidate has gotten. So, we're going to do our best and we're going to try to beat that, but we're going to try to make our organizing goals fit in with with what the data and the facts say about what we can achieve. And when we tell people that, and we tell people that we understand the reality of the situation and that we're doing this, that we want to win, but we have organizing goals beyond winning, it makes for a much better conversation with people.
So when I was talking to Sean, he kind of covered that there was almost like a pact between these third party, smaller left wing groups. I forgot what the other name of the party was, but I think it was the Progressive Party. They worked together. Is there any sense of that, in Maryland at all?
Yeah, there is. I mean, in Maryland, we have worked with the other small parties, some of which are on the ballot, including the Libertarians and at times the Working Class Party, for things like ballot access and debate access and on things that we agree on. We also believe that a broader democracy, we don't want to be the third party in a two-party system. We want to be another party in a multi-party system. So that, we support the Ujima People's Progress Party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Forward Party, the Libertarian Party. But in Maryland, we're one of the few left, or we're one of the only left parties that has ballot access consistently. So we'll work with groups like Ujima People's Progress Party and the Party for Socialism and Liberation who don't have ballot access. They do a different thing than we do because they are not on the ballot and we are. But we definitely try to work together with those parties.
Is there any conversation of just absorbing those votes? You know what I mean? Absorbing those candidates into yours? Like, I feel
I
like,
mean, it's one of my dreams that we would find in each state one of the left parties to be the one that has the ballot line and the other ones to do other type of work. And we've had some of those conversations here in Maryland. So like I said, we've had the ballot line for 25 years here in Maryland, and we're pretty good at getting it and securing it. So, we would encourage anybody who's a member of DSA or PSL or UPP or any of these other groups on the left to try to run with the Green Party, to run for a position on the Green Party ballot. And we've had informal conversations with those groups, but each group does their own thing based on what their democratic principles are. And I think oftentimes we will have election by election support, but there's no sort of unified effort to have them be part of us. But there is an effort to have cooperation and collaboration.
mm-hmm. So looking ahead, what are your main goals for the Green Party, both in Maryland and nationally? Obviously, you're running for a big ticket race, Governor of Maryland. Is there any really movement, let's say, on the local scene in Green Party politics for Maryland? Because when I was talking to Sean, we talked about how for those local, city elections, instead of having the parties listed, it was all just the names. So you'd actually have to go out and do the research. Is that similar in Maryland?
So it depends. Some of like Baltimore City doesn't have any like municipal elections below the city level because we're one of those few big cities that's a county unto itself. So like our city council elections here in Baltimore do have green labels on them. But in 2020, we had a candidate named Franca Mueller-Paz who got 35% running against a Baltimore City Council person that was an entrenched Democrat. That was the most that any person had gotten that was not a Democrat since like 1968 in Baltimore. And she was a teacher, a union leader, and played in a band, and she just had a really great and energetic campaign that spoke to a lot of people's needs and really unified the left in a lot of ways. So we have those kind of local races from time to time that are really strong. And on the other hand, we've got some folks that are elected in small towns here in Maryland on town councils and things like that. So, those folks that are elected right now are in nonpartisan races where it's just the name on the ballot and there's no party affiliation. So we do try to keep an eye on both those races and the bigger city races where we do have where we can have a party label on the ballot.
Sure. So some argue, I being one of them, that third parties can't win a major race like the presidency. It's just not set up to win.
Right.
How do you see third parties contributing to a healthier democracy?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, the role of a third party in a two-party system should not be to take and hold power in big races. It's just not realistic, as you argue. So we have to think about what it is that we can do. In the history of the United States, the role of third parties in those big races has been to serve as a force that drives one of the two parties in a different direction. So I think that until we get to a multi-party system, I think we have to see the role of third parties and big ticket races as bringing new voters into the fold that wouldn't otherwise be voting because they aren't interested in the two parties. B, bringing issues and solutions into the debate that wouldn't be there with just the two parties. And three, using the threat to spoil the election and to take votes away from one of the parties in order to get that party to change its direction.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, that's how third parties have influenced outcomes in big elections in the United States, is by using that very threat that people might vote for the third party instead of one of the two major parties because it aligns with their values and it aligns with their solutions. So, I think all of those are possibilities. And I think the closer the race is for governor, the more likely it is that the Democrats or Republicans are likely to go to things that we're effectively using to attract voters. And I think that has to be the theory of action for big races until we have a multi-party system.
Mm-hmm. So, are there issues or policies, you feel only a Green Party perspective can truly address? When I was talking to Sean, he really covered of how much Palestine really meant to him and how
Yeah.
important that was to him. So, is there any like real topics or issues or policies that you feel like only if a Green was elected here that they'd be able to address?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, Palestine is one of those issues, right? Palestine is an issue that both parties have been pretty unified in support of Israel on for my entire lifetime, for sure. And if there is not some threat from voters in order to withhold votes or to step out of the electoral system because of that, they're going to continue doing that. And we can start to see the Democrats are changing a little bit, not enough, not quickly enough, but are starting to change a little bit on that issue. So that's one of them. I think another issue is money in politics. I think at the end of the day, one of the things that differentiates Greens is that not only do we not accept donations from PACs or from corporations or any big entities like that, but we also actively campaign against money in politics. And I think that money in politics means that the people who are able to spend the money get the outcomes that they're paying for. And so, I think Palestine, money in politics are two of them. I think climate and environment are another one of them. I think we need to act as if there's an emergency right now and start to build resilience at the state level. We have one of the longest coastlines on the East Coast, and we have a lot of flooding risks, and we need to make sure that the communities that are facing that are ready and resilient to it. And I think another part of this is militarism in general. I think both parties in the United States and in Maryland in particular are excited to base the economy on the military industrial complex. And I think Greens understand the risks and damages that poses. So I think there's a lot of issues, but I think those are some of the key ones.
That's a really interesting point you bring up about the Greens not taking any money from super PACs or large donors.
Yeah.
So, whenever you have such strong beliefs, let's say in Palestine and all these other issues, is it worth it that instead of taking money from large companies and big donors and the possibility of, winning elections or increasing your chances of winning elections, is it worth it to not take that money in order to actually get in office, get your point across? Because I love the idea of no money in politics, but that's just not where we are as a society to be able to win.
Yeah.
So
So
is your own moral beliefs going over, the policy issues that you're believing in?
I think that's a great question. So Maryland has a public financing system for the gubernatorial campaign. So if we agree to not take any money from PACs, from corporations, and only take caps of 250 per person, and we are able to get 1,500 donors and $120,000, we qualify for up to an 8 times match from the state of Maryland. So we have a policy in place that allows us to use that approach and still get a decent amount of money. So if we raise $120,000, we'll get an $800,000 match from the state of Maryland from it
Really?
by by participating in the public financing program.
When
And
did
I
that
think,
pass? When was that? When was that? When
huh?
did that pass? Like that's pretty revolutionary, I'd say, for
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think it's probably been about 10 years at this point, the
wow.
maybe 12 years. The 2020, so Governor Larry Hogan, who was the Republican governor,
Uh-huh.
used public financing in 2014 in his first election, and was able to fund his election that way. So,
Mhm.
so far, the only person who's effectively used it in a gubernatorial election in Maryland
Mhm.
is a Republican governor. But in Baltimore City, which has public financing as well, um, the most moneyed and powerful incumbent lost in the primary in 2024 to a guy
Mhm.
who was using public financing.
Yep.
And I think the theory there is not that public financing allows you to have the same money that the billionaire donors are giving to the big candidates, but it gives you enough that you can have a competitive race. And
Yeah.
so I think we need to have more of that, not
Yeah.
just as a practice that the Green Party uses and
Mhm.
other candidates use, but as a policy, and make sure that we are pushing public financing in every place that we can. Because look, this Supreme Court and this Congress are not going to overturn Citizens United. And so we're not going to change the way that the laws around campaign finance are in a
Mhm.
significant way to stop it from happening like it is. What we need to do is to push for public financing as a counter to that big money financing.
Okay, thank you. Finally, what do you want voters to understand about the role of third parties in shaping the future of American politics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think the role of third parties in shaping the future of American politics is one, to give a vision of what it could look like if we had a multi party system. I think a multi party system is the way out of a lot of the problems we have. It's not utopian, it's not perfect, but I think it is better and it fosters more cooperation and more collaboration. The second thing is third parties are often going to raise the most controversial issues that the other two parties are going to ignore. And if we only have a two-party system, we're going to have a very narrow window of what is allowed to be talked about. But third parties can raise issues that become mainstream after a series of elections. So I think if we think about it as giving an imagination of what could be, of expanding the view so that people understand that we could have a multi-party system, and two, that when we have that, that increases the solutions that are on the table. I think that will make voters a lot happier and a lot more willing to participate in a system, and maybe give us some hope that we can rein in the sort of runaway two-party system that we have right now.
Mhm. Okay. Hey, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Andy. I really appreciate it. Giving a smaller YouTuber a chance. So yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a great day.
You too.